thought for today is, a pessimist sees a dark tunnel. An optimist sees light at the end of the tunnel. A realist sees the freight train. The train driver sees three idiots standing on the tracks. Today is May 27th, the feast day of St. Augustine of Canterbury. He's not the most famous Augustine. The most famous Augustine is St. Augustine of Hippo, the son of St. Monica. St. Augustine of Hippo lived about the year 400 AD. This St. Augustine of Canterbury was named after the original St. Augustine, and this St. Augustine of Canterbury lived about the year 600 AD, and he was born into a wealthy, noble family, and he entered the monastery there in Rome on the Caelian Hill called St. Andrew's Monastery, and he had made his vows of poverty, chastity, obedience, and stability, expecting to live his entire life in that monastery. But his friend became the Pope, and he became Pope Gregory the Great, and Gregory the Great sent Augustine to England to evangelize England. And it's interesting, Pope St. Gregory the Great had also been a very wealthy man. He was a prefect, a governor of Rome. He had many mansions, and when he converted to the faith, he donated all of his mansions to become monasteries. And so St. Gregory the Great is certainly one of the most amazing popes. Gregorian chant is named after him. And Pope Gregory was once walking through the marketplace in Rome, and he saw slaves, and so even young people, and he noticed the beauty of their fair hair and fair eyes, and he said, "Who are these young people? Where do they come from?" And they said, "They're from England, they're Anglo-Saxons, Anglos." He said, "No, they are angels, and we must evangelize them." And so that's what his desire then was, to send Augustine to England to convert them to Christianity. And so he asked his friend Augustine to take with him 30 monks from the monastery, and so they would travel all the way across France, and when they got to the English Channel, they began to be filled with fear. Augustine and the monks had heard rumors about how fierce and ferocious these pagans were in England, and they turned back and walked all the way back to Rome out of fear. And the Pope said, "No, you must go back," so he sent them back. And so they eventually crossed the English Channel, landed in the coast of Kent, and there they met King Ethelbert. And there were some Christians already in England, but not that many. But the king's wife was a Christian from France or from Gaul. And eventually the king did allow the monks to establish a monastery there in Canterbury. And the monasteries were centers of knowledge, education, culture. And from that one monastery, the Catholic faith began to grow. Ethelbert was baptized by Augustine of Canterbury, and Augustine would set up dioceses in London and Rochester and Canterbury. Canterbury is the primatial see of England. They say within a few years, over 10,000 pagans were baptized by these monks. So they began the process of evangelizing England and bringing the Catholic faith to England. So Augustine would die in the year 605, and he's buried in the monastery of Peter and Paul in Canterbury. So we see how the faith was brought, from Rome to Great Britain, to England, and eventually would lead to the conversion of England. So later on, of course, we'd have great saints like Cardinal Newman, who would be an Anglican bishop who would become Catholic and led the Oxford movement. Father Faber and many others would convert to the Catholic faith. And England, of course, would be a Catholic country up until Henry VIII. And Henry VIII in the 16th century would break away from England. But fortunately, in the 1900s, people like Cardinal Newman and others would come back into the Catholic faith. So let's remember to pray for the continued conversion of England, which once was a pagan country, then became a Catholic country, and now it's obviously a split between Anglican and Catholic. And of course, in this day and age, there's so much lack of practice of the faith, not only in England, but around the world. So we do have to pray for the continued conversion of England and continued conversion of our country as well. So we pray today, St. Augustine of Canterbury, pray for us.